What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning into the Sack Rat Boating and Fishing Show. Check out today's project. So I picked this up for free on Facebook Marketplace, but it was free for a reason. I mean, you can see it's got a ton of corrosion from the salt water. The insides are corroded. I noticed that this was broken. It was actually missing this part, the recoil starter, but I got that on eBay for pretty cheap. It's an old Honda 7.5 BF75 outboard motor. It's a 4-stroke. I think it's like early 80s. But yeah, I mean, it was free for a reason. It's pretty jacked up. But let's see if I can get this up and running. Let's pressure wash this motor. If you don't have one of these, you should get one. They're super fun. Curious if this motor is going to run on starting fluid, so let's throw a bunch in and see what happens. This is the carburetor intake, so let's fire it up and see what she does. Here we have the carburetor. As you can see, there's a lot of rust and crap on the outside. From working on motors in the past, I know that this motor is not going to run right without a good carb cleaning, so let's take this off. The first thing we want to do is remove these 2 screws. This is the carburetor float bowl. All this gunk in your float bowl, you got to get out or else your carb's not going to run right. That'll clog up your fuel lines. Float seems to still be working. Under here is your jet. I can almost guarantee this is going to be clogged. This is made of brass, so be careful not to break it. If you open up the carburetor, you can usually just tap that free. There's a lot of corrosion on it. Just tighten this one finger tight so you can get it off, because these do break off. There's still a lot of corrosion in here, so I'm just going to let this carb cleaner sit for a while and hopefully it should break down all that gunk. The drain screw is super corroded and I couldn't get it out, so I used this siphon pump, put it in the oil reservoir, and look what came out. And it's gross. It's like chocolate milk, but there's no way the motor would have ran right. These clamps are all seized up, so I'm going to use some silicone spray to get these unseized. I put some fresh oil in it, got the carb all hooked up, and got a fuel tank hooked up. So here I have the fuel connection disconnected now, and the part that connects to this is really hard to find since this is an old motor. So instead I have a Yamaha linkage here, and that fuel line is just connected directly to the fuel pump, which goes back into the carburetor. So yeah, let's give this a shot and see if it runs.
It wants to. Try with that. Whoa, it wants to.
Let's put a little more water in it. Let's try that. Last time I fired the motor up, I noticed it was barely pumping any water out of here. So based on how neglected this motor is, I'm sure it needs a new impeller. So to do that, if we come to the lower unit here, there's 5 10mm bolts that go around here that are connecting the lower unit. And connected to the shift rod, you have a little cotter pin right here that's connected to a shear pin, so you got to pop that out and you'll be able to drop the lower unit and get access to the impeller housing and impeller. That shear pin touches this part right here, so you're going to need a 10mm wrench to put on this bolt right here so you can loosen that so you can slide the shear pin out. Check this thing out. Look at all this crap that's in there. That's not supposed to be in there. In the process of taking the lower unit off, I did break 2 bolts off that were super corroded. But man, that's nasty. Based on the amount of sand that came out, I'm guessing this motor was sunk and the clear obvious corrosion that this motor has. But under here is the impeller, that's the impeller housing, and I got a new one here, so let's see how this impeller looks. There's just 4 10mm bolts holding the impeller housing, so let's check it out. Oh wow, actually looks kind of good. So much to my surprise, this impeller actually looks pretty good. I mean, it's got all of its fins, the rubber isn't too warped, so I'm going to keep it on there for now. And with the new impeller I bought, I actually did just pick up another Honda 7.5 horsepower outboard, so I could always swap the impeller onto that. Yeah, I really think that the amount of sand and debris in the lower unit was the reason that it wasn't flowing water good. So I do have some marine grease here that I'm going to put on the impeller shaft, so hopefully that helps the impeller spin better and we get some better water flow. So while I have the lower unit off, I'm going to change the gear oil. There are some pinions and bearings in here that need to be looped up, so it's a good idea every so often to check these. To get access to that, there's a screw here and one down here, so I'm going to check those to make sure that that gear oil isn't milky, meaning water is getting into our lower unit. Alright guys, it's the next day. I fired up the motor late last night. I'm sure my neighbors hate me, but even after cleaning out the lower unit of all that sand and debris and greasing the impeller, it still didn't pump water. So I'm going to follow the water lines. So I have the first connection about right here, it looks like, and then this connects to this spout right here, and I know in here is the thermostat that regulates water down to here, and this was my issue. It wasn't pumping water out here. So I got a can of compressed air that I sprayed into all the hose lines and all the spouts, so they should be all free. And to check the impeller's working right, I mean, it should spit water out here. So if it does, then we know we have some blockage in here, or maybe the thermostat's bad, which is why it's not spitting water out here. To test the impeller's working right, we should have water flow through here. So our impeller works. We got water flow through here as you saw, but last night I didn't have this clamp on, and as you can see, this line here is super jagged, so maybe it was losing compression or not flowing properly to the spout right here. So I'm going to hook it up to that spout, tighten that down, and it should pump water out of here. And if it doesn't, then we know we have a bad thermostat or there's some blockage in here. I did try to take off these bolts, but the corrosion is so bad that it's pretty much caked onto the cylinder head and I can't get it off. So hopefully, it was just a bad seal. I have that hose line tight, so we should see some water flow out of here. I think the ultimate test now is to slap this motor on my boat and see how it performs.